Shwan Eskenahay, greetings everyone, and welcome back to our second session for our grant writing workshop. My name is Denise Litz. I'm the Chief for the Division of Economic Development in the Office of Indian Economic Development with the Department of Interior. Such a pleasure to have you all joining us. We're thrilled to have you all back, and if you're with us for the first time, we welcome you as well. We're going to move right into our presentations, so that you all can have the access to the information. And thanks again for joining. I'll turn this over to Elwood.
Thank you, Denise. Welcome back. Welcome if you're new. So now we're going to get going with a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded, or is being recorded, and we will provide a copy of that presentation, of this presentation, as well as part one soon. Everyone is muted during the presentation. We will have question and answer sections periodically through today's presentation. Feel free to enter the chat, the questions. As well, at the end, we will have a survey. So please take a few moments to complete that survey at the end. As well, we will be launching a poll soon. So I ask that you please help us gather some feedback with answering the poll. And we are also, the slides will be available too after this. Moving right along. Welcome back. Fundamentals of Grant Writing, Keys to Funding Success, Part 2. We're going to take a deep dive into NOFOs, RFPs, LOIs, and finding opportunities. And we are also going to, launch the poll. And bear with us here. Poll's coming up soon. So today, part 2, this is the agenda for today. Notice of funding opportunities and for federal proposals. We're going to go over the letter of intent. Getting started, we're going to share OIED funding program areas, resources, and IANTA resources. We're going to give an overview of grants.gov, notice of funding opportunity. We're going to explore a letter of intent and a request for proposal response, as well as give some best practice tips and access to additional resources. And let's launch the poll. The question for the poll is, what kind of funding have you applied for? And you're able to select multiple choices. And the responses are coming in at a rapid rate. Well, those numbers are going quick. Give it another minute. So the numbers are pretty, it looks like most have applied for either federal or state funding foundation in the poll. And I'm going to move right along, and I will be turning it over to Christine.
Good morning or afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us. My name is Christine Celentano, and I work with Tribal Tech and under the Training and Technical Assistance Program for the Office of Indian Economic Development, Denise's team. So I'm going to get us started here with objective 1. We're going to share the Office of Indian Economic Development funding program areas, resources, and IANTA resources. And IANTA is American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association. And we have Gail Chihak joining us for that. And you will meet her in just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jim Henry with the Office of Indian Economic Development. He is an economic development specialist. Jim?
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jim Henry and Hasasaka Nikki Heskam Yahaka. Welcome, my relatives. I'm with the Office of Indian Economic Development with the Division of Economic Development. And today we're going to talk about the Economic Development Specialist team. And there are 3 of us. And it's broken down, our service area is broken down into 3 areas. Alaska, the Southwest Zone, is Janelle Green. She's citizen Potawatomi. I have the Northwest Zone, which you'll note is the green color. And our newest member, Rebecca Horsechief, covers the Eastern Zone. We also put on this slide our website address, which you'll notice is at the bottom of the page. And I'll turn it over now to Rebecca. Next slide.
Good morning, good afternoon. Maybe you're just waking up, depending on what zone you're in. I'm Rebecca Horsechief. As they said, I'm one of the newer economic development specialists. I'm so happy to be here with you all today to hear all this great information. You can never hear this information enough. Honestly, I've been writing grants for over 20 years and it's all always very relevant and always changing. So I'm going to talk with you about the Office of Indian Economic Development. We have some grant programs to highlight. I won't read from the screen, but we have IBIP, the Indian Business Incubator Program. We have our Native American Business Development Institute. We have our Tribal Tourism Grant Program. We have our National Tribal Broadband Grant. And we also have our Living Languages Grant Program. So now we've made all of our awards for this year, okay? So once our budget is approved, we're gonna release info on funding opportunities, but you can look for those anyhow on grants.gov. You'll become very familiar with grants.gov, or we actually have on our website that Jim mentioned, we have a page dedicated to all of these grants. So once you click on it, it looks like a little bubble on our Office of Indian Economic Development, Division of Economic Development. You'll see Indian Business Incubators Program. Click on that, and there's a whole page dedicated to those opportunities on our website. But also, I just want to reiterate that all of these grants are closed right now, but in addition to being able to go to our webpage and click on those bubbles with each grant's information, you can also see the who's been awarded and award amount. Because I always want to know, like, who's being awarded, and what are they doing, and how much did they get funded for? So that's my spiel of it all, and I'll pass it off to Janelle. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Rebecca, and hello, everyone. So I'm just going to share, we could go to the next slide, share some other resources that could be a benefit to you. So our office has been working with a variety of federal agencies to consolidate economic development resources for tribes. And that includes collaborating with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA Rural Development, the Economic Development Administration, and also the Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration and the Administration for Native Americans. And from this collaboration, we've developed an alternate economic development resources directory. And so it's a document that lists economic development funding resources from tribes from these participating agencies. And the resources are organized by federal agency, and they're color-coded to make searches in the document easier. You can access it on our homepage through the link Alternate Economic Development Resources, or here with the link that's provided. And as Rebecca mentioned with our programs, it's just important to note that most of these opportunities are closed at this time of the year due to funding cycles. Timing on funding is available once budgets are finalized. You can set up notifications in grants.gov to receive alerts when funding opportunities arise. And so with that, I can, I guess, turn it over to Denise at this time.
Thank you so much, Janelle, and to my team for the excellent overview of our grant programs. I appreciate that. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Gail Chihak. She joins us from the Klamath tribe. She serves as the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association, or more commonly known as IANTA, She serves as the Tribal Relations and Outreach Manager. She works to cultivate partnerships to support IANTA's programs, including IANTA members, as well as tribal travel, tourism and recreation staff, and tourism and recreation industry leaders. Gail has worked with tribal arts, tourism, economic development, and environmental protection for the National Congress of American Indians, Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, and the Indian Arts and Crafts Association. While Arts and Tourism Coordinator for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, Gail co-authored Native Peoples of the North, a Traveler's Guide to Land, Art, and Culture. She has written numerous grant proposals and served on grant review panels for Administration for Native Americans, AmeriCorps, National Park Service Historic Preservation Fund, Department of Education, Library Services Special Programs to Indian Tribes, and Indian Health Service Scholarships. So please help me in welcoming Gail. Turn it over to you. Gail?
Thank you, Denise. It's a great pleasure to be here again. And our last session, I presented information about the different types of funding that are available. And today I want to share with you some of IANTA's resources. Although IANTA works on cultural tourism, there are a lot of other kinds of funding that help support tourism as well as other programs. This includes everything from economic development to cultural heritage, recreation to environmental protection, agriculture to housing, transportation, and broadband access. Every month, we publish a funding opportunities newsletter. We also have a cultural tourism resource webpage. We also host monthly webinars that have included sessions from a number of federal agencies who share their grant programs and tips for writing proposals. These are all posted on our website and can be accessed anytime you want to view them. Next slide. Our monthly funding opportunities newsletter shows federal, state, foundation, and corporate funding, with programs listed from the earliest due date to the latest. Each listing has a link to the application page and includes tips on how to use the funding to support tourism. They're fairly long and extensive listings. If anybody knows about any that we don't have listed, we encourage you to let us know. We have a number of federal agencies that send us their notices every month. Next slide. We also have a cultural tourism funding resources webpage. These include all of the listings that are open from our newsletters. They also include a place where you can sign up to receive the monthly newsletter. In addition to the open grants, there's a link to grants.gov and a list of federal agencies that have funding programs. Most of the programs have yearly cycles and open around the same time every year. The website also lists several resource guides published by federal agencies that list their various programs, funding resources, and technical assistance that's available. I've posted the covers of these on the next two slides, along with links so you can download the guide. On this page, we have Stronger Together, which shares federal funding and planning strategies to promote sustainable economic development in rural America. Next slide. Here are four other recent guides. The USDA Resource Guide for American Indian and Alaska Natives provides information about 17 USDA agencies and their resources. The second one, the Recreation Economy Guide, shares resources and success stories from across the country. Federal Resources for Native Arts and Cultural Activities consolidates the federal agencies that have funding or other resources that support arts and culture, along with key contacts. And the last one, the Directory of National Park Service Community Assistance Programs, lists 54 National Park Service programs that provide opportunities for community involvement and include funding for funding and technical assistance. Next slide.
Thank you, Gail. That was super interesting information. And I want you all to know that when we provide the resources toolkit from part 2 here of our workshop, all those links will be included in there and you'll be able to access them that way. And everyone who's participating will get the resource guide or the toolkit. So I'd like to introduce objective number 2, and that is we are going to provide an overview of grants.gov. We're going to go through a notice of funding opportunity, explore a letter of intent, and request for a proposal response. And with that, next slide, please. This is Rondell Clay. She's joined us today. Ms. Clay has been a trainer and technical assistance provider for ANA. She has been doing this since 2000. She has a diverse professional background in planning, management, education, and administration. And for 20 years prior to her work with ANA, she had a career and was focused with Indian education as both an educator and administrator for the Seminole Tribe of Florida in the education department. So I'm going to turn this over to Rondell.
Thank you, Christine. I appreciate it. Next slide, please. Okay, we are going to take a look at grants.gov so that you can see the homepage and all the different things that you can do there. Grants.gov was established back in, I think they started out in 2002. And it is established so that there's a single source for finding grant applications within the government. The website is organized into tabs. There are a couple things that I want you to learn about specifically. Up in the upper right-hand corner of the slide on the left, you see help, register, and login. We're going to go into how to register in a little bit, but when you do go to register, you click on that button. You do not need to be a registered user to search for grants. And you can use the search function right underneath where it says help, register, and log in if you would like. I find that instead of using Indigenous, if you use Native Americans, Indian tribes, tribal, those kinds of search words will bring up mostly Indian grants, but there'll be a lot of others that fall in there. So the more short and succinct you keep your keywords, the closer you get to finding a search. We're going to look at searching a little in a few minutes. But as you can see on this website, there are tabs right underneath the search, just below the grants.gov header. And you can click on the search grants tab and it will take you to a place where you can again use a search, just do a search, or you can define it more, do an advanced search and pick out specific agencies and within larger departments if you know what you're looking for. Then you've got the applicants button. There are a lot of different resources that are under applicants. And one of them is setting up a workspace, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. We're going to skip over grantors and system to system because they don't really, not many users go there. Grantors is specifically for the federal agencies and those that list grants within grants.gov to use. System to system is something different that nobody uses, that I'm aware of anyway. Forms. They do have a list of forms, but keep in mind that when you're writing a grant, you are not going to need to use those forms because the forms are built into Workspace and you'll fill them out there. And then finally, the support tab. And if you scroll down farther on the page, you are going to get all these different links that give you information about grants.gov. Most important here, you've got grant writing tips. You've also got Grants Learning Center. There are YouTube videos that you can reach at the banner at the top, the brown banner at the top. Over to the right-hand side, it's the third one from the end. Those videos really help with how to get registered, how to select roles, who selects roles, getting access to Workspace, that kind of thing. Next slide. This is what the search page looks like. If you would click that second tab at the top, this is what you would come up with. The one thing I want to point out on this one, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, there is in blue text, export detailed data. If you click on that particular link after you do a search, it will download all the information that came up in your search into a Excel format so that you can go back and look at it later. And then under this very first column called opportunity number in that Excel sheet, those are links to take you to the specific page for those links. So that's very, very helpful when searching. Next page. Okay. When you find something that you want to look at, you're going to need to, you can subscribe to it. And under Connect, as you can see, the light blue color of the tab, you click on Connect, and then you can go subscribe to opportunities and follow the directions down at the bottom there. And it'll, what that'll do for you is you will get notices from the system when something new has been posted. And even when an announcement has been put up for the first time, there are times when they find they made a mistake or they left something out and they have to go back and publish a second edition. So having those announcements coming in are very helpful. Next, please. Okay, so here we get to the applicant registration page, which you can either access from the top right of the home page, or you can go to the applicants tab, and it gives you step-by-step instructions on how to register. Now that'll give you, it gets you access to grants.gov. Depending on who you are within your different tribe or organization, whoever has the role for setting up Workspace will be the one who will send you a link to a particular workspace. So for example, all of the A&A grants are out right now. And so if you were to select and say that particular, say the SEDS, the social and economic development strategies, then it would, you couldn't get into that workspace for your organization until you were given permission, unless you're the one who has the role for setting up workspace. But like I said, there are a lot of good videos for what to do and how to do it. Just a little caution, make sure you know who your sam.gov e-business point of contact is. They have to, there's an approval process with them as far as initially getting a higher role in this registration process. If you're just working, collaborating on a grant, then it's not a problem. Next, please. The Learning Center, like I said, is great. This community blog is relatively new. You can type in questions and get answers back from other users, but they've got a lot of short, to the point videos that you can take advantage of, and other step-by-step tutorials. Next. Okay, this shows you where you go to set up a workspace for an application. And it gives you the basic settings depending on how many people within your organization are going to be working on a particular application. So basic, intermediate is for 3 to 5 people, and advanced is for larger organizations with more than 5 people, and organizations that are using consultants that are not within your organization. So even if you're a small organization, if you are using outside consultants, you probably have to go to the advanced. Okay, a lot of questions that you may have are answered by going through the tutorials or clicking through the different web pages under the workspace overview. So I strongly suggest you take some time, learn about the workspace roles and how to set up custom roles. You'll have one person who has control of management of the workspace, and then the other people are contributors. So next, I think that's it for me. Yes, it is. So thank you for your time. Good luck with grants.gov and all your grant writing in the future.
Thank you, Rondell. So that brings us to, it's really good information, and there's so much good, helpful, like Rondell said, tutorials on there, and they make it fairly easy to navigate. So we will include all the links to what Rondell talked about today in that resource toolkit, just so you know. Okay, so if you're not on mute, please take a moment to check and mute yourself so it doesn't interrupt the presentations. So we're going to go through our federal notice of funding opportunity. I'm joined by Dennis Wilson, who is a grants management specialist with the Office of Indian Economic Development. And I'm going to take the first part of a NOFO, and he's gonna finish it off and take you to the end. Next slide, please. This is the NOFO we're going to go through. This is with the National Park Service. It's currently open. It's due on December 20th. We don't expect you to all run out and apply for this. It's just a sample NOFO. And we're going to show you what you can typically expect in a notice of funding opportunity. By the way, they used to be called funding opportunity announcements, and in some cases they may still be called that, but just giving you a little heads up on that. So NOFO stands for Notice of Funding Opportunity, and we'll say that often so you understand that that's what NOFO is. Okay, I am going to share my screen and pull up the NOFO, so give me a second. So this number right here, if you can see my cursor, this is the opportunity funding number, and you'll need that throughout your process once you decide if this is a good fit for you or not. Generally, there'll be a table of contents, and you want to, what I typically do is print the table of contents off and make sure that I'm covering all the important aspects of NOFO. Probably the biggest, greatest tip here is to read it from top to bottom. Don't miss anything. There's really important information in here. So we're going to go through these sections as quickly as we can. And we had a lot of requests to go through this. Some people are afraid. I know when I started, I was afraid of them. There's just so much information, and they used to just appear in the Federal Register and were really hard to read. So this is a little different. So I downloaded this NOFO from grants.gov, and it starts with the program description. It talks about the authority, which is a legislative authority. This is where the money comes from in this case. So the National Historic Preservation Act, the Save America's Treasure Program is the program. And then it talks about which federal regulations are going to be relevant in this notice of funding opportunity. So you want to pay attention to those as they show up in this notice of funding opportunity. So the assistance listing here is 15.929. You're going to want to know that. That actually shows up on the forms you have to fill out. And it will tell you here which forms you need to fill out. So this is real important when you're determining whether this is a fit for your tribe or tribal organization, your agency, is you want to look at the background information. In this case, it's a Save America Treasures grants from the Historic Preservation Fund. And it says what it does here: provides preservation and or conservation assistance to nationally significant historic properties and collections. So I highlight that so I can go back to it. There's also important information in this program background, which tells you that you are going to have to provide a dollar for dollar match. It's a little unusual. There's not always dollar for dollar match requirements, but in this case there is. They tell you here is $26,500,000 for this program. And under the preservation projects, it tells you what they must be. I'm not going to go through all those, but pay attention to any language that says required or must. Again, you want to read the whole thing, but we're just going to run through this and give you some basic guidance on what to pay attention to. When you get to section B, this is true of most NOFOs. They're kind of designed the same way, have the same categories. You're going to look at the total funding. You're going to look at the maximum award amount or the ceiling, and the minimum award amount, which is also called the floor. So you're going to look at those numbers. You're going to think about your project. And here you're still determining, is this a best fit? Here I highlighted a minimum of 50% match. So that means if you're asking for $750,000, you have to come up with $375,000. If you're at the bottom, you'll need $75,000. So can you come up with that match? These are all things you need to consider when determining whether this is a good fit for the program you would like to pursue. The anticipated award date is July 18th, 2023. This is helpful, one, to know when you would be awarded if you're approved, but also when you put your objective work plan together, your approach, you pay attention to that date. So you might start your activity around August or September in this case. So it talks about the number of awards. So if you divide that 26.5 million by 55, you get an idea of about how much money would be available for your program. And again, you're going to determine whether this is a good fit for you. So this is a grant. It tells you the kind of funding instrument type it is, and you can read about that, exactly what that is. And then this is a real key part. Eligible applicants. You want to pay attention to this because you may go through this whole thing and not pay attention to this and find out you're actually not eligible. So you want to pay attention to where you see yourself in this list. And I just highlighted the places where our audience today may see themselves. So moving on, you want to read all the information on eligibility and make sure that you are eligible before you start putting your resources and your time into this. So we go here to the cost sharing and matching. I talked already about this, but you'll want to, it says, yes, it's required. And you'll want to make sure that that's something you can come up with and determining whether this is a good fit for you. Here's some program requirements. Absolutely a must. You want to pay attention to these. I just highlighted a couple of things that are listed under here. Only one, you can only apply for one of these. And these are really important when it comes down to writing the application. You want to make sure you pay attention to notes like this. Your administration costs plus your indirect costs, if you have them, to administer the program cannot exceed 25% of the total amount of funding you're requesting. And then preparation for plans can't exceed 20%, for instance. So that's just an example there. You want to pay attention to all those things. You don't want to miss anything because you don't want to put all that time into something and then find out we missed something and your application isn't even reviewed. So super important to pay attention to the whole NOFO. And then like I do here, just highlight what you want to pay attention to. You may be aware of a lot of the other things. This is really important information. I'm not going to go through it today, but as an example, you know, I just made a highlight. So if I were applying for this, I would come back and pay attention to all this. I write myself little notes. You can do that in a PDF. You can write yourself notes and whether you have questions or not. In this case, it would be a question maybe for the contact at the end of this NOFO. Here, eligible costs, highly recommended you're familiar with 2 CFR 200. It's used across all federal agencies. And actually, the links for this is available in the Part 1 resource toolkit. So you will receive that. In the next few days, we should have it posted onto our technical assistance dashboard, and we're going to send you the link to that. So you'll have resources from Part 1 and Part 2. And the 2 CFR 200 resources are in that part. Okay, so I just highlighted all these things because they're super important to pay attention to. This is what will be funded, and this is what you can actually apply for. The different parts of your project are highlighted here. And then we go to what's not funded. You want to pay attention to that. You don't want to propose a project that falls into this category. So another super important part. And again, administrative costs that come in over 25%, they won't even look at your application. That's part of their initial vetting process. This just says how it's going to be, how oversight is going to be performed by the agency that's administering the funding. And then it talks about excluded parties here. You want to pay attention to that. You have to have good standing in SAM.gov, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here under D. So it tells you here what a full application consists of. Really good information. Those are all your forms. There's a form for project abstract summary in this case, and those will all be in grants.gov under application package. So you'll have access to all the forms. If you're working in Workspace, they'll be in there automatically. And then it has actually has templates for project description worksheet, project justification, budget justification worksheet. So all these things will be as part of the application package. Again, this section D is all about forms and what you need to include. Here in the project narrative, it tells you what you have to do. In this case, you want to address each evaluation criteria separately in the narrative, and Dennis will go into that a little bit more once I'm through this section here. So I highlight the areas that I think are really important to writing. Say we've decided now we're going to go for this. Here's all the forms we need. Plan for that ahead of time so that you can get them all signed appropriately, filled out and signed appropriately. You have to, in these forms, be able to submit your unique entity identifier, which you can register for at sam.gov. We will also be including those links in your resource toolkit. And you can find sam.gov through grants.gov. So there are multiple ways or you can just go to sam.gov and you'll get all the information you need. It tells you here very specifically, they want a detailed budget narrative, and there's very specific direction in this NOFA, which is nice. It's not always that way, but we intend to provide you with the resources you need to put together a successful application in both parts 1 and part 2 of this workshop. So you'll get lots of resources here. It does have a budget justification worksheet, and it tells you how to find it here. And then it tells you, again, this is comprehensive, what they want in a project abstract summary. This is usually 1 page, and it tells you exactly what they want in there. It may sound like I'm rushing a little. That's because we only have so much time, and we wanted to be able to go through one of these with you and show you what to expect. You'll want to read conflict of interest disclosure very carefully. You can see I highlighted a bunch of things there. And then an audit, if you have one, will be required. These are forms again. So this section D is really all about filling out your forms and making sure that you address the things they're asking for here. Here's more information on sam.gov and how you acquire a unique entity identifier if you don't have one. And you need to make sure that you're registered with sam.gov and that your registration is updated on an annual basis. So here is the due date, and you want to pay attention to that so you can plan accordingly. It tells you how it'll be reviewed. It talks about funding restrictions here and how to submit your indirect cost rate agreement or statement with your application if you have one. There's a lot of information here, so everyone's got different ways of handling indirect. And this goes through each one of those ways that are possible under this funding opportunity. This talks about more about the required documents that need to be submitted, and it tells you exactly how to submit them, what they are, and what they're looking for. And that will bring us to Dennis. So Dennis, you can grab the screen and take us through the rest of the NOFA. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're coming from. Happy holidays. Like Christine and everyone said, we're rolling through this pretty quick, and I want to keep the time. So I hope I have control. Let me see.
You turn it to you. There you go.
So I'm going to cover E through H section, and in each of these sections, we could spend hours talking about these because despite the fact that most are here looking for state and federal funding, nothing's the same across the board. So each of these are specific to the particular funding mechanism and the agency that's implementing this. So we're here at criteria now, but as you produced your application, the writing of it, this is really what you should be answering. This is where we're going to be ranking the applications. Obviously, go through this. I would, whoever's doing your grant writing, as beautifully as it is going to be composed and in a lot of ways canned, speak to these components, even directly, if preferably. You don't want to leave anything on the table. You don't want to leave any points on the table. So if you're not speaking directly to these criteria, at least answer them in such a way that it's apparent. I mean, it's right there. So whoever's reviewing these your application, they know that you covered every one of these points. You covered everything that's been asked that needs to be flushed out. They're just, reviewers are just people. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to read your application, come to criteria 1 and say, do they deserve the 25 points? Did they answer everything in there? Did they flesh everything out? Did they provide support for anything? be cognizant of that and just make sure that you are directly answering to these. This particular NOFO has 4 sections, 25 points each. And they're all different. Ours, sometimes we have 50-point sections. We are going to be cutting those down a little bit more to smaller bites, smaller chunks as our NOFOs are developing and going forward. Again, the review process is pretty straightforward. And if there's anything you're going to notice in grant processing, the review process, our OIED discretionary grant process is that we hang our hat on the consistency of the practice. It ultimately drives fairness so that everybody is evaluated per that cohort systematically, because when audits come sniffing around, that's the first thing they're going to ask. And we want to make sure we can absolutely straight face say yes. So up until the review, make sure everything is completed, everything is turned in, all your registrations, all your updatings are complete as of the date of solicitation, because we are in E2 right now. There's a little lag on this, so bear with me. Oops, I went a little bit too far. So as your applications come in, first and foremost, we typically have what's generally called a business review. We want to make sure that A, you're eligible, and B, you have a complete application. That will further kick you to the next bucket, which is the review process, which has its own stopping points. But don't get through the door, obviously. Demonstrate per the eligibility requirements that you are eligible. Demonstrate that with documents, with anything you need for that particular funding. And then obviously with your application, make sure that, like Christine was saying, go through the NOFO fully. Look at everything that needs to be covered, check every box, ensure that every document is submitted or included in the body of the application, reference different points, and just make sure that you are eligible, you have a complete application, and that you have the best shot of garnering the most points in the review process. How they're reviewed is per each different office, obviously. And that's dictated by a lot of things: regional programs, national programs. Sometimes they get everybody together nationally in rank, and they like they did here in Part B, the comprehensive merit review, they break into different sections. So, superior may be in a whole nother tier of ranking and awarding, and so on and so forth as they go down, and as they expend their money, they want to make sure that they're doing it per their own policies. So ask questions, understand what that process is, so that you address anything like that in your application. We are on page 20. So selection, again, has its own process after the review is completed, after the ranking is and the selection process. Then we'll get into kind of this post-ranking, where this will be almost renegotiation in a sense, for if there's any budget issues, if there's any questions, these are where they'll be answered and asked for submittal. Not really amending your application, but adding to it. There could be changes in a venue where you put per diem for a grantee meeting, and that needs to be changed. So there's a lot of things that need to be done on sometimes unallowable costs, things of that nature. This is where this will come in as you're kind of negotiating towards the final award. Obviously, the risk has assessment. Sometimes this is in the business review. They'll look and see if there's any single audit findings, if there's any issues like that, and they'll put the appropriate risk. A lot of federal aid to states have this in a more documented format, and that's done almost every cohort, if not yearly. E3 CFR, know your CFRs. Make sure that you know which ones are applicable for each funding. Typically, the circulars, the OMB, the 2 CFR 200s are overarching, but then you have specific ones per each grant program. So know those, know the requirements of those, the can and can'ts, stuff that you just won't see in the NOFO because it's just too much. They'll just reference it. So look at all of those. Make sure you know what the policies are. I know this goes without saying, but it's worth revisiting because there is updates, there is additions, and you want to know which ones are applicable for this coming year. When it's time to award, you typically, especially if they work within Grant Solutions, you'll get kind of a general automated notice of award. This will be sometimes in line or maybe just a bit after, maybe a more formal award letter from the region, from the national program, welcome you into the program. You've been awarded X amount of money. Here's the general terms and what you're doing. It changes, right, per each agency. So you typically get an award letter notice, kind of formal lettering, but typically your grant won't officially be implemented until it comes from the awarding system, like in our case, Grant Solutions. Once you get that notice of award letter, that's when the clock starts. That's when you're good to go. That's when you can typically do drawdowns. You could start your period of performance per that, and you can start work, you can start invoice. Everything goes forward from that date, not necessarily when you've got those preliminary letters. So know those differences. Go through the NOA, go through the NOFO on how moving forward this is going to be implemented. A lot of cases, you're not going to see cooperative agreements anymore. It's more so that once you do that initial drawdown, that's the binding mechanism for the NOA and the terms and conditions, NOA notice of award, if I didn't say that. Another point in there that's in related as we're moving into the federal award, the administration of it is knowing if there was any pre-award allowances or that's something you won't see really in our grants, but you will see that in state and federal state grants. And that's specific. You should know that already and what can and can't be incurred. It is at your own risk. So it's worth knowing those. You see that in a lot of national, like coastal grants with Fish and Wildlife Service. Administrative and national policy requirements. Again, a lot of information. Know these, know what's involved, read it all, give it a good read, especially when it comes to like your proprietary information, data that you want to secure, make sure it's not out there or free floating, that you can secure that. And that's worth fleshing out and asking. So really be cognizant of that if that applies to you. I just kind of skated through that F2 section. F3 reporting. This is it. This is really the lifeblood of a lot of our programs. Reports are everything. Please be current, timely, transparent on your reporting. If you don't have a set form, make sure you know what goes in that form, because it does take a lot for us to produce those. So sometimes it is on your own and how you write those, but especially the narrative stuff, but make sure that you know what goes into that. You could load those directly into the system, like in our case, Grant Solutions, or you can confirm via email and even send them to us, just if you want to double up on that. Ask questions in the initial part. As it gets close, make sure there's no assumptions, that the understanding, you know exactly, sorry, getting calls. That way you make sure you know what you need to do and you don't really have any questions. A lot of times the formality is just you're getting it in, the good, bad, and the ugly. Just be transparent with it. You may get questions, especially if you have particular objectives that you need to answer to on subsequent systems that track that. You won't see that here with OIED, but some of the bigger programs you will. Ours, we typically have 2 reports, and this is pretty uniform. You're going to have a federal financial, which is done in the F425. That's pretty easy. And then the narrative, which you either have a form that you're supposed to do it in, a system you're supposed to do it in, or in our case, we'll have you answered towards your statement of work and the milestones, goals that you have in there per your timeline and per that particular report's coverage. So 6 months, what did you do in that 6 months? Are you on task? Are you online? Where can we help? All that will go in there. So as we're moving down the line here, real property, you may have other requirements per whatever funding you're securing, COI, other mandatory disclosures. I missed anything up there. SAM's registration, Christine covered that. You want to be current. You'll see the contact information in G on the bottom, who to go to for what type of questions, whether it be programmatic, whether it be administrative, and the systems, the technical support. You'll see a lot of grant programs refer you back to the NOFO for things like customer support, where to get support when you need to make changes in the system. That's why that's there. So when you get any questions, obviously run to your point of contact, run to your grant management specialist or your officer, but also reference back to the NOFO. There's a lot of good information in there that could sometimes answer your question or at least save you some time, but nothing beats a call and email. So we're typically always here to help. Other information payments, that's a big one. We use ASAP. So you should have had your ASAP completed and have a recipient ID prior to the closing of the solicitation. That's a must. That's a major headache to have to deal with, even if you're in pending status. So again, that's just part of the NOFO and the application process, knowing that you're registered and every box is checked, add submittal prior to the end of the solicitation. So that's the end of the NOFO. It was a nice, short and sweet one, but it covered a lot of things that's applicable to our programs and others you may be applying for. So I like that. That was a good one. I'm completed. Thank you for your time. I'll turn it over to Christine to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, NOFOs can be a lot. They can run up to 70 pages. It's a lot. So we found one that had 24 pages so we could try and get through one for you all. We had a lot of requests for that. So at this time, we were going to take questions, and I don't believe we have any. I'll just double check with Elwood.
At this moment, I don't see any questions.
All right. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Gail, and she's going to talk a little bit about nonprofits and foundations. And so, Gail, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. So in our last session, we talked a little bit about Candid and some of their resources, and we wanted to share a little more about them today. We've heard that several of the tribes do not apply for foundation funding, and we wanted to encourage you to take a look at them because there's a lot of money out there for foundations that have funded Native programs. Candid compiled some information about these foundations. They noted that there are over 100,000 foundations, and with them they have over $1 trillion in assets, and they give out about $82 billion a year in grants. Next slide. Candid's website includes a section called Investing in Native Communities. They partnered with the Native Americans in Philanthropy to develop this resource. Today, I want to show you how to use this resource. The page includes several headers, and one of them is Funding Map. If you click on the funding map, it will show you where the organizations and tribes are that have received funding. And then you can also click on another map and it'll show you where those funding resources headquarters are. Next slide. On the side of the map, you'll see this legend. And if you click on list, you'll come up with this table that I shared the last time. The table shows all of the grants that were awarded year by year and by amount. And if you see an award you're interested in, you can click on the details column and get information about the award and the grant descriptions. I noted that some of the recent grants to the Native programs are all listed there from the largest to the smallest. If you click on the funder, like Ford Foundation, next slide, you'll get this information. You'll get a list of all of the agencies or tribes that they funded, when they funded them, and how much they funded them for. As you can see, by Ford, they give fairly substantial grants, from awards from $100,000 to several $1 million. If you click on one of the, if you see a grant that you think might be similar to yours, if you click on it, it'll give you even more details, and that's what's in the second column here. I chose the Alaska Native Heritage Center, and if you look, you'll see that they were funded in 2021. They received $3.2 million, and they were funded for general support to preserve and strengthen the traditions, languages, and arts of the Alaska Native peoples. Below that, I listed some of the other tribes and tribal programs that have received funding from the Ford Foundation. $100,000 was given to American Indian artists to help them develop their arts expositions. The Association for Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums received $90,000. There's the Heritage Center. The Indian Collective received $2.5 million. Native American Rights Fund got $2 million. But you'll be able to see all of those and find out what they were funded for, so you can target your ask. Most foundations are founded by people who care about certain issues that affect their lives. You need to find the ones who care about what you are interested in funding. It's important to build connections and relationships with the funders. I served as a president of a foundation in the Northwest for several years and found that the major funders cared deeply about the environment and social justice. I also found that funders talk with each other and will advocate for programs they believe in. I used to get calls from other foundations, program officers who were looking to find support for a program that they might have, that they've funded, but they wanted to help advocate for them to gather for further funding. As a fundraiser, I've also found that foundations in the region share information about programs. So if you want to get their support, they can often open doors to other funders. Building relationships is very important. Next slide.
Thank you, Gail. Such good information, and really, we will provide you access to links, and there's also, well, I'll share with you, there's actually a training that coming up that will provide the link for you to register in if you're interested in finding out more about Candid and foundations that are available there. What we're going to do now is share the approach to nonprofits and foundation opportunities. Gail mentioned this, and this is true of federal funding as well. Examine funder priorities, make sure they align with what you're trying to do. But getting to know a funder is super important so you can decide whether it's worthwhile for you to establish a relationship with them. We're also going to talk about letter of intent, or otherwise known as letter of inquiry, and answering requests for proposals from foundations and nonprofits. Next slide, please. So this is what I was talking about. This is about where to find non-governmental opportunities. And Candid has something called FDO Quick Start, which is the foundation directory online. It's a free search engine. And you can search up to, I think it's about, they say about approximately 150,000 foundations. And just check them out for free. A lot of these services will require a subscription. If you have a big business development department, or you have, a grant writing department, they'll often subscribe. But this is a free search, so you might want to check this out. Next slide, please. This is just an example of what it looks like when you go to Candid, and you'll see this search site, and these are some keywords, and you'll get these slides as well. Next slide, please. So here's that free training I talked of, and we'll go ahead and include the link in our resources. It's on January 17th, and it's from 11 to 12:30, and they're just introducing you to the foundation directory online that I just spoke of. Next slide, please. Okay, letter of intent or inquiry description. So the background is your first contact with the foundation should be extensively studying the foundation's website. So you want to review their missions, their goals, their annual report, their giving guidelines, and grants list. If you have any unanswered questions, you want to talk to their point of contact that's listed, and start building that relationship. If after carefully reviewing everything, they seem like a good fit and you might be a good organization to help them with their mission, then you want to definitely approach them. What's important is, and I will share the structure for a letter of intent or inquiry. What's important, though, is it's not a vague exploration of an idea. A letter of inquiry is assume that you already thought through your proposed project, including a budget, and are just presenting an abbreviated description in the letter of inquiry or intent. It's known as both, so that's why I'm using them both. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So this is a technique for putting together a letter of intent. It must be concise yet engaging, and use your words smartly. Avoid jargon, adjectives, flowery, subjective statements that aren't supported by facts. Write a logical and persuasive argument emphasizing how this project can help solve a significant problem or void in the knowledge base for your community. Next slide, please. Okay, so this here is a guide for putting together your letter of intent or inquiry. You're going to have an opening paragraph. Again, this is one paragraph. And then you're going to hopefully catch them with that opening paragraph, catch their interest and want to read on. You're going to talk about your statement of need. That's usually 1 to 2 paragraphs. And then the bulk of your letter will be in the project activity, the what and how of the project. You're going to talk about your anticipated outcomes, what you expect to happen from the project. You're going to talk a little bit about who you are and why you're a good organization to implement this project. You'll include just 1 to 2 paragraphs on the budget. You'll have a closing paragraph and be sure it's signed. So we are going to give you much more specific guidance on this under each one of these boxes when we share the application, grant writing application resource toolkit with you. Next slide, please. I wanted to mention the First Nations Development Institute. They are a really fantastic organization. They are a nonprofit. However, as you saw with some of what Gail shared, they do have money funneled through them. So they have different program areas. I was gonna, if we had enough time, take you through their website, but I encourage you to go to their website, check out their program areas, see if any of them fit some of the programs you would like to have funded. And they also provide some grant writing resources. So they have a video and they have some other resources they share, which everything is free and available to you just by going onto their website. We will provide a link to their website in the application resource toolkit as well. And I think what's important to understand about some nonprofits, they are usually a vehicle. They can be a vehicle used by other, even federal agencies, foundations, other nonprofits that can't get the money out on their own. They will funnel it through organizations like this. So we encourage you to check them out. Next slide, please. So this is the structure for a response to a request for proposal. So for instance, First Nations Development Institute has different funding areas, and like the Office of Indian Economic Development has tribal program funding areas, they have their funding program areas that they're focused on. Those funding program areas generally mimic and will mimic where the funding came from. So if the Ford Foundation gives them $2 million, they've got some objectives, the Ford Foundation, that they want to see accomplished, and you'll see the details of that in the request for proposals. So this looks a lot like what we covered in part one. There's a request for an abstract summary. Again, you want to catch their attention in this summary. You want to talk about what you propose, very briefly what your anticipated outcomes are, who you're serving, and the amount of money you're going to need. The statement of need, again, very similar to the letter of inquiry, but the request for proposal is a little more structured than the letter of inquiry. And they will specifically say, this is a request for proposal. This is typically the format you want to follow. The project activity and methodology, you want to put in the who and the how of the project. Again, you want to talk about your anticipated outcomes, what's going to happen as a result of implementing your project. In usually most requests for proposals and now federal funding, notice of funding opportunities will require you to put together an evaluation plan. So you'll want to provide both quantitative and qualitative assessment of your work. So you're showing them how you're monitoring your project and staying on track and meeting your benchmarks. You want to include a communication strategy with a request for a proposal response. And this means, how are you going to disseminate your information to your funder, to your leadership, to your community you're serving, to the public, maybe through social media. So you want to talk a little bit about your communication strategy. You're going to include a budget and a budget narrative. And they all want to know, how are you going to sustain your project outcomes? So you want to think a little bit about sustainability beyond simply another pot of funding, but hopefully through this project, you've created opportunities for sustainability. And if you weren't in part one, we talked a lot about sustainability in part one. And again, all those resources will be available to you who are participating today. There will also be more detail in each of these boxes provided to you. Basically, it's called basic components of request for proposal response. So you'll get that information in more detail in the alternative resources toolkit. Okay, next slide, please. Do we have any questions? I am not seeing any.
I don't see at this time.
Okay. All right, then I am going to go ahead and I'll introduce our third objective, which is to share some best practice tips and access.
Sorry to interrupt there. Just as we were getting ready to move on. There is a question in the chat. Actually a couple. So the first one is, how do you demonstrate sustainability when you are just beginning?
So I'll take that. If anyone wants to follow up with what I have to say, please just go ahead and jump in. So sustainability is really for the project outcomes. So if you, for example, are developing say you're developing a curriculum for your tribal language program, once the curriculum is done and it's used by the tribe and then maybe by a partner school, that curriculum lives on. That's a sustainable aspect of your program. That's just an example. So you're not showing that you're sustainable before you're asked for the funding. You're showing how will your project outcomes be sustainable going forward. So if you develop something and you share it with others, or you build internal capacity, you've trained teachers, for example, that's making your program more sustainable because now you have teachers in place and they can continue to teach that curriculum you developed. That's an example. Does anyone else want to take a stab at that question? Okay. Do we have another question, Ellen? I did see one question that came out that asked about templates. We will send you all the guidance here in more detail about the letter of intent and the request for proposal response. So you will have that. There are templates that were provided in part 1. We can share those as well with everyone on the call. And then also there was another question, I believe it was on quantitative and qualitative evaluation. Quantitative usually are the hard numbers from your project. We served 33 people and they each received 50 hours of training. Those are really hard numbers you can share. The qualitative is more about how this benefited them. So you want to share in a participant survey, most said they feel 50% competent or something like that. That's a more qualitative, subjective way of evaluating your outcome. And there is more information on evaluation shared in part 1 of this workshop. So if you're here today, we'll be sharing both sets of resources, the part 1 resources and the part 2 resources. So you will have access to that. Are there any other questions that I may have missed?
I think just out of the time, being respectful of everyone's time, we will probably move on. We only got a few more minutes left and we can follow up with those questions. That works for you?
Yeah, it's great. So I'm actually turning it back over to you, Elwood.
Thank you. So the next objective, best practice tips and access to additional resources. So some of the best practice tips, no matter which type of funder, we are going to make sure that we try to establish good relationships with the funder. Remember to use keywords in your search for the funding. Also, map out your timeline strategically for planning, prep, and submission according to the due dates. Also, just be mindful of not only the due dates, but sometimes there are time stamps that those applications are due. It could be 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just make sure that you keep track of that. And then take full advantage of available technical assistance resources. And part 2, grant writing toolkit. it's been mentioned several times in the webinar. We're going to send out the recording, but included in the toolkit and not limited to are links to federal government funding, grants.gov, cultural tourism resources, samples of an application, samples of letter of an intent structure, guidance, basic components of a proposal, many grant writing resources, also foundation and nonprofit funding related resources. Those are all going to be, included into the resource toolkit. So at this time, we ask that you all take the time to complete the participant survey, and that will be coming into the chat here soon. And so give you a little bit of time for that.
Oh, we do have a few minutes if there are any outstanding questions that we can answer here. So if we find them
I did
in the
see
chat.
a couple of them in the chat. One of the questions that came in, it's a good one. All of them are good. I'd asked if someone would be able to answer this one. And the question is, Rondell or Gail, with the opening paragraph of a LOI, what is the main way or strategies of catching the eye of the reader?
When I've reviewed proposals and especially the summaries, you really want something that's going to be heartfelt, that explains your need in a way that captures the imagination of the reader, and a project of how you're addressing it and why that fits your community. So I think as long as it's simple and direct, and if you can make it heartfelt, that really helps.
Thank you. I am now going to turn it back over to Denise, as we want to be respectful and mindful of everyone's time during this busy week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elwood. I just wanted to close out our webinar by thanking everyone for joining us. We hope you found these resources useful. We're happy to provide support moving forward. We're looking forward to additional workshops coming next year on business plan development and business sustainability. So look for those on our website in the upcoming year. So wishing everyone a happy holidays, and wishing you all good times with your friends and family. Thanks for joining. Take care.